Hello everyone, and welcome to another webinar in the ongoing webinar series offered by Thought Technology. Today's presentation is going to be particularly useful for us in our current context where we're a little bit different office settings, we have a little bit different computer settings, and so we're all going to very much benefit from learning about how to reduce tech stress by enhancing healthy working at the computer with biofeedback. Our presenter for today is Dr. Erik Peper, and I'm sure many of you already know his name because it is pretty much synonymous as being an international authority on biofeedback and self-regulation. He is Professor of Holistic Health Studies at San Francisco State University. He's the President of the Biofeedback Federation of Europe, past President of the Association for Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback. You probably know him because he's the author of many scientific papers and books, and he's excited to be able to present today based on his newly published book, TechnoStress, How Technology is Hijacking Our Lives, Strategies for Coping and Pragmatic Ergonomics. It's also co-authored by Richard Harvey and Nancy Fass. We are now going to get going, and Erik, please go ahead.
John, thank you so much for the opportunity to present today and also Thought Technology for arranging this pre-session. I'm just really happy to present and to talk about this topic, especially so relevant in COVID-19. You know, basically, as many of you know, COVID-19 has changed some of our biofeedback practices. Some of us are now working only online. Some of us are working with clients. Some of us loan equipment to clients. Many of us work at home, which is both better or worse, but in many cases, it can be worse in ergonomics, especially for our clients who are working in businesses and are now working at home where there's no space or little space. They are adapting the kitchen table for their laptop, etc. And it may be actually difficult to do biofeedback for some, although we can easily do that with loanable devices, but it's a lot of other things. What I will do is partly translate some of the biofeedback practices in non-feedback practices. And it reminds me of a couple of great sources. A very old book, and I just checked Amazon, it's much too expensive now, but one of the best books I ever came across for that is a book by Beata Jenks. Go to the library. It's called Your Body, Biofeedback at its Best. It contains many somatic practices which we can teach online to the client to have at least similar experiences what we would see. Okay. Then obviously progressive relaxation, breathing techniques, etc. And HRV can be done easily online, just as posture changes can be done with very economical feedback devices. It's true. It's ironic, I never attempted this, but our book TechnoStress really complements biofeedback. It is because it's more. It isn't just the technology. It isn't just ergonomics. It's our whole system perspective. And as you can see, I was jumping with joy when I got the actual copy. It's hard to believe. Here it is. It is real. And it really offers the practical tools to avoid our evolutionary traps, which I'll explain, which trip us up, and how to reduce physical strain, prevent sore muscles, combat brain drain, correct poor posture, change our cognitions. So I think it's really pragmatic for ourselves and the practices for our clients, or for the clients as well. At least that's what I would recommend. Remember the shift from the office. In the office, we sometimes had very good ergonomic setups. Now we squeeze in at home. You know, in the office, we were working together often, and now we work lonely by ourselves. And here, this is my neighbor. In fact, as I look out my window, person working full time, and they're working outdoors, which is great for airflow, because if there's lots of airflow, you reduce the exposure to COVID. But still, you can look at the posture, and the key of all these postures and positions is that the person is totally unaware that they're tensing their muscles, they're holding their breath or bracing. They have no idea this is occurring. Till late at night, they feel sore. And then we look at little kids. I mean, you know, now kids are locked up at home. They're just looking at the screen. Look, they're all looking so closely at the screen. And in fact, from an evolutionary perspective, we are just captured by the visual stimuli. We have almost no choice. We look, you can see the attentiveness they're doing. You can almost imagine the child almost holding their breath raising their shoulders, focusing closely on the screen the whole time. And any of us who have kids know, or are playing computer games, when it's time for dinner and we call, let's stop, let's go for dinner, the child will say, just a moment more. And a half an hour later, we have to call again. And you can just see, we now meet socially together, and we look at screens, look at a collapsed posture all the time, the slouching, the head forward, the shallow breathing, the less blinking, and the increase, as you look closely, the eyes converge and accommodate, the lens tightens. We are unaware of it. However, if we do this constantly, such as many of the younger children and people in Singapore, what you see is by the time students are in high school, more than 80% have myopia and need corrective vision. Yes, how we use ourselves develops a structure. So notice the process is more than only biofeedback. It's really how we're using ourselves in a much broader perspective. I just looked at this slide, which I made up for the program to give a sense of it for kids. On the left here, you see the classical position, sitting, looking down, collapsed, and here still someone playing outside, which may in some cities be very difficult. But we get near vision stress, leads to myopia. It leads to immobility, diabetes, obesity. We have much less abdominal movement. We are more sympathetically activated without release. We increase obesity and diabetes, as I said, and there's an increased risk of ADHD. While the upright active body movements do the opposite. This is really our evolutionary background. And then after we watch the screen, we're just exhausted. And so many of us, when we sit and work on screens, we have neck and shoulder pain. And the question is so often, what can we do? We now label that sometimes called Zoom fatigue or webinar fatigue. And part of that is because as we are communicating, we lose our social cues. Think of Stephen Porges' perspective, looking at the cues of the face. We're just missing all those. We get neck and shoulder discomfort. We get dry eyes. We get increasing myopia. When we finish the day at the computer, we go outside and the world is just more fuzzy. And then we get tiredness and exhaustion and low energy. And then at night, we have more difficulty sleeping, partly due to the blue light. And we develop our addictions, 60 times a day, 20 times a day, depends on your age group. We keep checking our cell phone. Is it there? Let me quickly look. Did I get another message? I don't even know that I keep checking my messages, my Instagrams, my, all the different social media, because each of those are like an addiction. We get a little, stimuli, a notification. We look, that feels good, and then we remember that. And when you look at the device uses, what people experience, here's this more scientific data. I can skip it. It's from using computers, laptops, tablets, smartphones, exhaustion, stiffness, shoulder pain, back pain, insomnia, cold hands and feet, probably due to sympathetic arousal, wrist pain, arm pain, leg pain, etc. And then we have challenges keeping our focus. When I'm working, and this is really, we wrote that up in our book as well. It's almost a diving analogy of paying attention. Traditionally, we would pay attention. We would focus on a task. We dive deep in the task. We really process it. And eventually, when we're done, we pop back up. Now, in fact, we don't even know we don't do that. We start doing something. We receive a notification. We pop up to answer that notification. Then we have to dive down again, pop up again. And this popping up, this arousal, is really almost without our control, because the notification are really signals which evoke an evolutionary response. And those are called evolutionary traps, our respondings of it. Okay. And then we pay less attention, as all of you know. You can just look at the pedestrian deaths. We all have had this. We're looking at our phone. That means when we look at our phone, and I'm doing that, all of a sudden, I'm becoming less aware of my periphery. I'm no longer attending to all that noise. And I can be hit much more by cars, which the death rate has increased. I trip more likely, etc. And so why do we have all these problems, which I now call Zoom fatigue or TechnoStress? Let me summarize them very quickly. One, it's life stress, work style, amplified by COVID-19, sheltering in place, reduced social activity. And then all the things that used to add to discomfort at work, called work stress, workload, responsibility, lack of control, lack of social support. Remember, those are not any different. The major differences which all of us experience is being connected 24/7. It used to be you leave work, and still for some people you left work, then you could leave it behind. Now we keep working on our devices. And in fact, there seems to be a high, for many people who work at home, they have higher productivity, not less. And then without any awareness, and here's where biofeedback is so useful to show this, we have ongoing arousal and vigilance while looking at the screen. As I said earlier, we automatically react to changing visual and auditory stimuli. I know people are different, but for me, it's obvious. You know, when I used to visit my family, my parents, my mother often had the television in the background. But the moment the television was going, without any awareness, I would be looking at that screen and I would be distracted. Not that I wanted to, it just happened automatically. Then, as I'm working, I tend to have low-level muscle tension, the absence of any momentary relaxation or breaks. And as I'm aroused, I tend to do more shallow, rapid breathing. And I tend to stare at the screen, and do not blink. In a way, as I'm involved in the task, I lack my body awareness, and I develop sitting disease, which may be our new smoking. Okay, let me just do this as an example. As you're sitting here in front of your computer, maybe slightly, take your mouse, hold your mouse in your hand, put it way next to the keyboard. I'm going to do a little exercise at this moment. So hold the mouse next to the keyboard, and in a moment, let me first describe the exercise, and then I'll let you start. What I'd like to do in a moment is to draw with the mouse very carefully the letters of your street address. For example, my office is 2236 Derby Street. So I'm going to draw the letters of those, but I'm going to start with the last letter and then go backwards. So Derby Street, I would then draw the letter T. Then I would left click. I don't want to do that on my screen at least, or simulate a click. Then I would draw the next letter, the E. And I would make each of those drawings of those letters about a ½ inch in height. Is the instruction clear? So remember, you're going to draw with the mouse next to your keyboard, to at least far to the side of the keyboard, the letters of your street address, starting with the last letter first. And each drawing of that letter is less than a ½ inch, or about 1 centimeter in height for those who are in Europe or Canada, or the rest of the world. So now begin. Really, do it. Do it as quickly as possible, quicker. Don't make a mistake. Remember, the movement is very small. Quicker. Quicker. That's enough. And how many of you noted that as you were doing that, you held your breath? You slightly tightened your shoulders. You forgot to blink. You stiffened your whole trunk to stabilize. And yet this is an example that so many of us do all the time. Okay. I've just done that one. And so why do we get, so let me continue. we get Zoom fatigue and stress. We have increased attentional load. As we're going through Zoom, like I said earlier, we're missing all the social cues of the facial expressions. And sometimes audio and video signals are low quality. And as we are working, we are not only doing the work, we have the role of being the director, the producer, and the actor. So there's really much more work to be done. And as I pointed out earlier, we get near visual stress. As I look at the screen, I have this fixed distance. And as I look, the eyes converge, the lens accommodates. And as long as I keep looking at the screen, they do not relax. And I tend to get immobility in neck and shoulders. And then so often we collapse. We don't know if we're doing it. You know, we just collapse, which increases our access to negative thoughts, as articles we have published. It makes cognitive activity slightly more difficult. Really, you could think about this, that posture is a conditioned stimuli and probably evokes the same feeling. So when I'm collapsed and depressed, I may be like this. When I put my body into it without knowing, I re-evoke that same state. And then we have harmful ergonomics, because most of us at home, many of us, work on laptops, tablets, cell phones. We lack coaching and training because we sort of use these devices automatically. And we really have ignored our evolutionary foundation of health. You know, whether that's diet, etc. Okay. Remember, we started on the left here as this in our evolution. We ended up here, where we mainly are living in our head, which is much bigger, but yet we forget to be healthy. We need to be in movement. Just think about it. This is still one of the indigenous people, the San, Bushmen. Here they're all talking to each other, and look at the flexibility of the joints. And this is our Western working world. Here's a family at Newark Airport I happen to photograph. Or here are young people in Taiwan all getting together. Notice the difference? Or here, we used to walk around, move on our left. Now we just sit, collapsed, and do not move. What we have forgotten is something called evolutionary traps. An evolutionary trap, really, occurs when behaviors which allowed us to become successful in evolution and for survival are now continually evoked, and they induce harm. A classic and horrible example is that, in a certain way, of the albatross at Midway Island. Albatrosses, which in Midway Island would fly over the ocean, they would look for something shimmering in the water. When they would see an object that looks like a fish, they would dive and eat it or swallow. The trouble is that now the area around Midway in the ocean is part of the Pacific gyres, where all these pieces of plastics are floating. They're coated with algae, and now they look for the albatross the same as fish. When they take it in, they swallow, it tastes the same. And so they take it in, and later on when they come back to Midway Island, they even regurgitate to feed their chicks. And now around Midway Island, see thousands of skeletons just like this. This is a dead bird. The skeleton is there, the feathers are still there, and here are all the leftover pieces of plastic in their GI tract. Now, this is an interesting question. Who is responsible? Do we blame the bird for being so stupid to eat it? Or should we blame the environment to trigger, which now really triggers the response to eat the objects? Now you can ask, well, we're not like the bird. And yet, we are. Now the traps are around us just as much. We react to ongoing changing stimuli, which we needed outside. I see something in the periphery. It could be danger, it could be food. I need to react to it. That's our vigilance for survival. I need to continually check for social connections in my small group. Who's going to be in power? Who will have found food or something like that? I need, that leads to our immediate addiction. Each time the update occurs, I'm going to react. Light, artificial light or light keeps us awake. But keeping awake too much leads to insomnia, leads to poor immune function. And then we forget that whatever enters our eyes is perceived by the brain as real. Till the late 19th century, everything we saw was real. We had no easy mechanism to say, that is just a movie. We intellectually say that, but we still react to the change in visual screen, which means ongoing autonomic arousal without regeneration. And then we tend to sit, and when we sit, that is also beneficial, because when we sit and lie down, we technically would use less energy, which is very important for survival when there's a limited calories. However, now we sit and we do excessive sitting, and all of us know how hard it is to get up. So just for a moment, get up. Really just get up. Really just get up. I know it's hard. We feel ourselves glued to the chair, but just get up. And now for a moment you're getting up, just move. Reach up. Just move. Reach up. I don't care how you do it. I know some of you are still sitting, you didn't get up. Do get up for a second. Really go and move. I don't care how you do it. You can even clap your hands. Whatever. And now just sit down again. And note for that moment how hard it was to move. But just check when you actually moved. Notice your energy went slightly up. Your mood may have gotten better. Continue our evolutionary traps, we react to cues for food, fats, and sugar, because we need energy for survival. And equally, we react to pornography as cues for fertility, for reproductive fitness. There are many more like this. But this is a critical perspective. The question you could ask is, who is responsible for their behavior? Do we totally blame the child for wanting the sugar, or the child for reacting to the cues to the cell phone, or to the notification? Or maybe the person doesn't quite have that control because it really evokes that survival mechanisms. Thus, we may have to have more environmental or family control to reduce the appearance of those cues. Okay? And so with all of that, how does biofeedback fit with this? And how did I come to looking at this? So one, we need to keep in mind that TechnoStress is more than only working at the computer. It is like the other parts are like cofactors together. Okay? But my beginning of this was really observing what happened to a client. Many years ago, I was asked as a consultant to work with to make a consultation of this client who had severe neck and shoulder pain, that time called repetitive strain injury. There's no such thing really, but still. And the person already had very good ergonomics. They had an ergonomist assess the person. But what I realized at that point is that if you have the correct ergonomics, like having the correct adjusted chair, that only gives you the opportunity to sit correctly. It doesn't mean you will. If you get an incorrect chair, then you almost don't have an opportunity to sit correctly, and then you have to do all other things. And then we realized when we then attached the person to the equipment and monitor their physiology, that the person was totally unaware what was happening in their body. Okay. So let me give an example. So biofeedback then is to the rescue. The seeing of the signal makes it believing. You can do assessments of typing and mousing during data entry, and I'll go through that. You can look at ergonomic ways to improve sitting and posture. I'll go through sensor location and momentary training. So let me go through that. For those who want to know more about the pure biofeedback of this, here's the book called Muscle Biofeedback at the Computer, and it's free. Thought Technology makes this book available free now for everybody. We wrote this a number of years ago. It contains the protocols, how to do the assessment. It also contains a significant segment of training protocols, what the person can do by themselves or your client. I highly recommend that, especially since it's free. We made it available at free of charge, and Thought Technology, or the Biofeedback Federation of Europe, is making it available at no charge, as I said. So let's go to electrode placement for some of the people. Okay, you can record on the trapezius. Many of you have done that. There are at least two ways to do this. One is single placement. You put a very narrow placement over one of the muscles. Here you can do right and left and compare them. Or, because often we do this portably at work sites or at people's homes, we use a small device at that time, and still at many times do use a small Maya track, a single channel EMG. And then we put wide placement electrodes, one active electrode over one trapezius, one over the other, and the reference or ground at the center. Or we go from the scalene to the trapezius. This is a little different. This measures the area of tension through the whole neck area. You don't quite know what is involved. It's very useful for breathing, because when people inhale more in their chest and are doing thoracic breathing or sighs, like this, the scalene activates, you get that measurement as well as the trapezius. So it's a very useful way to teaching diaphragmatic breathing. When this stays quieter, the only movement that can occur is more diaphragmatic breathing. Or you can look at the neck, at the cervical areas. You put the electrodes right at the neck, and when a person tightens their neck, they would observe this. Well, let me do one more on this. And now you can see on the arm, this would measure both the anterior deltoid, that would make the arm go forward, or the anterior medial deltoid. We often use displacement instead. That allows to get a signal when the arm goes both forward and also slightly abducts. And many people are totally unaware of any tension in their shoulders while working. It's truly surprising. And finally, you can do it with the forearm extensors or on the flexors. You can also do it as a wide placement by putting one active electrode on the flexors and one on the extensors. Okay, there are many ways of doing this assessment. And here is a classical recording we have done hundreds of these. Each person is different by definition. But this is already so old. You can see 2008. Basically, what we do is have the person sit with their hands on their lap. Then they bring their hands to the keyboard. Then they do typing. Then they rest at the keyboard. They may do mousing and eventually rest on their lap. There are all variations of this. They may even be asked to think of something stress and see how that affects it. But these are the most common themes that are available. One, when they're sitting comfortably, the hands on lap, we should see very low activity in the forearm and deltoid or trapezius. That's one. This is a measurement. Two, when their hands are resting on the keyboard and just relaxed, there ought to be no activity in the forearm or deltoid. And as you can see in this case, where it says number 1, the person has tension and they are totally unaware of this tension. I want to underline, they don't know they're doing it. 2, then they start typing. Then they start typing usually, or data entry, their breathing either stops initially it tends to shift more to shallow breathing, often more thoracic breathing, not in her case, but definitely more rapidly. You know, I gotta perform, quick, quick, quick. And as you can see in number 3 here, their shoulder tension went up and the person was totally unaware of it. That's the key, unawareness of tension. And during this whole time period, if you drew the line at the bottom, there were no restorative breaks. The muscles were held constant all the time. While here on the forearm, there should be activity because she's using these fingers. There's nothing wrong, by the way, to have shoulder tension as you're moving back and forth. The problem is this constant tension. Just experience this, what would happen. And the person, remember, is unaware. Just as you're sitting with your feet on the floor, I'm going to do the following exercise. Please follow if that feels comfortable. I'd like you to lift your right knee about 1 inch upward, or 2 centimeters up, so the feet have left the floor. The feet are floating on the floor. So your knee is slightly up. Just do that. Feel the tension in your hip. Really notice that tension. And very quickly, you can feel the hip flexors tightening. Notice that? Can you feel that? Notice it? And how long can you do this? Well, that probably depends how much I pay you. But probably by now it's almost uncomfortable. Just let go and relax. Now there are 2 questions. One, did that muscle really relax, even though you felt it was relaxing? But for most of us, you can almost feel it relaxing, even getting warmer or something like that. And you also know for muscles that when muscles are working well, you need to tighten them and let it go. The analogy is to walking. When I'm walking, I tighten some of the muscles in my hip. I relax them at each step and I go back and forth, and I can walk for extended time periods without getting exhausted. But here, the person never relaxes the muscle. That leads to tightness and soreness over time. Historically, that was less of a problem for people who were typing, because when they were typing, they would hit return. And then, after typing, they would have to roll the paper, in the typewriter, take it out, and then get up and store it. So they, without awareness, had continual breaks in their daily work habits. Okay. I can keep going on these. On mouse, you see the same phenomena. Let me look at another example. We have, you can measure, skin conductance. When people work harder or they get emotionally aroused, you get more skin conductance increase, you get an increase in heart rate. What makes biofeedback so useful? When we show this to the client, their face almost drops. They now believe it. Now I can do the simple training of having the person take breaks. Notice here again, this is the forearm in this case. The arms never relax when they are on the keyboard, and also not really relaxed while doing data entry. Once they see this, they may believe it, and now we can train them to take breaks, keep moving, drop your hands to your lap, wiggle around, or is it necessary to breathe this quickly? Here we can now shift to slower breathing, whether we use heart rate variability training, easier diaphragmatic breathing. That is one's clinician's preference. Remember, keeping in mind, people are highly unaware of their muscle tension. This is a very old study done with Diane Shumay and others and myself, and where we monitored the person's movement of their arm in different positions, as I said at the keyboard, and they subjectively had to rate their muscle tension. Look at their awareness of their deltoid muscle. Here they say that this is muscle tension, and here's the subjective rating. Notice here at about 8 micro, maybe it's 12 microvolts, I guess. They say the muscle tension is a 4. Here the muscle tension is more than 80. They say the muscle tension is 3. They're totally unaware. Most people are almost totally unaware of the tension here. It's a great placement to show when the arm goes slightly forward, the person doesn't know they tighten. Once they see this, they get the concept, then they're much more likely. Final is the part about emotions and stress. This is a very old slide. And notice you have the hands on lap, you measure the upper trapezius. And here you just see the tension very low, and the arms are up. On my screen, something popped up. There was a stretch break that told me I need to do a momentary movement. So all of you just do a little movement. I interrupt my own work to do that. So I'll do that too. Makes no difference what I do. I can roll my shoulders. I take a little breath. I look at my flowers outside in the yard so my eyes can diverge and relax. And now I go back to work. Going back to this slide, I still remember where it was. I record the muscle tension from the shoulders, the person sitting with their arms on their lap, low tension. Now we ask them to think stressful imagery. Often the trapezius tightens a tiny bit, not much. Now we look at the same recording while they're working. In this case, they're using their shoulders a lot. But look, how many times the muscles relax in between. Those are the micro breaks or EMG gaps. That means there's muscle tension there, but at least they regenerate. And now you have the person type under stress. And look, although the muscle tension is higher, it isn't too much higher really. But it's much more important there were no more breaks. And so that is the critical part. So notice that the stress or tech stress is not just how we sit, it's also the emotional stress. And then the final piece in muscle recording is, does the muscle relax after activity? This is illustrated. This was a journalist who came to interview me. And so we did something very similar. This is looking at her right forearm. This is looking at her neck. And what we then saw is, just like everybody else, hands on lap, hands on keyboard, totally unaware of this tension, working, hands on keyboard, tension. That was not as much the problem. That made sense because she was lifting the fingers away from the keyboard, although totally unaware. But her neck and shoulders, notice that after she moused, they never let go. And so I turned to her and said, you must have, achy neck and shoulder tension and achiness. And she sort of almost surprised us, how do you know? And because the muscles didn't let go. And that leads right to a classical protocol developed by Sella, Dr. Sella, where he looks at that not letting go. Here's an example. You can have a person sit, make a fist with your hands, relax, make a fist with your hands, relax, make a fist with your hands, relax. Repeat this 10 seconds. In this case, we measured both the forearm and the trapezius to scaling. And what you see initially, not too bad. They relax. But after a while, look at it. They think they relaxed, and they didn't. But more importantly, look at what happened in their neck. When they start tensing their forearm, they also tightened their shoulders. They didn't quite relax the shoulders, as you could see here. The tension keeps holding. The result, if they work like this the whole day as this person, chronic neck and shoulder tightness, and a component is they never learn to let go. They did not know. Biofeedback, EMG is superb in training for that. And also as a way to train micro breaks. So you can have people work, relax, work, relax, work, relax, and the EMG can see if they can do it. And as the person said in those training programs, I never realized. I braced my shoulders, held my breath while typing or data entry. Now I know the importance of not doing this. And just as a reminder, because when we are working, we get so captured by the computer that we have no choice. I highly recommend you insert an app on your computer. And this is a free app that's available. You can get it from stretchbreak.com. You run it as an app on your computer. You can set the criteria on this, on options, to have it pop up every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, every 10 minutes, and it'll guide you through a stretch. It's free, so that's always very nice as well. Let me go what happened here. I'll go like this. And then, like I said earlier, it isn't just like we work. This starts very early. This is a very old study we did with children playing computer games. Here they're watching, they're doing their game. Look what happens. The muscle tension of the trapezius stays up. The muscles in the hand, in the forearm stay up, and they breathe very quickly. But you're saying, oh, this is only 2.5 minutes. So what? And you're right. You can do this for 2.5 minutes and then relax. But then record them for 31 minutes, 30 minutes. Look at the breathing pattern for the whole time. And this is how we are now training ourselves, or many of us. So by the time we go to the office, these are our habitual patterns. We develop TechnoStress. We sit in a collapsed position. We have neck pain, eye irritation, headaches, back pain. It needs to be ergonomics. We need to do account for that. Like I said earlier, you cannot, if the ergonomics, the arrangement is incorrect, it will be more difficult. Ergonomics. As you can see, it needs to be individually adapted. If you're very small, it doesn't work. If you're too large, it doesn't work. Or you can see, you can sit up, or you can collapse, even if you have the right chairs. So it isn't just that you have the right equipment, you have to sit in the right position. There's nothing new about that component of ergonomics. The moment you lift your arms up, especially at the keyboards, raise them up, you increase the pressure on the supraspinalis. These are old data. Notice, look at the limits of circulation endurance, because when we tighten muscles, the muscles constrict around the arterioles and they reduce blood and lymph flow to the tissue. And so you get major disturbances, as you can see, the moment you even bring the arm slightly away or forward, as you can see in the middle and onto the right of this screen. And when a person works like this, you're going to get major disturbances. And now you can monitor what happens to the muscles. There are many different ways of doing this. And so this was the earliest studies we did when we asked the question, which keyboard works well? And this is the question, is the Microsoft natural keyboard better or a regular keyboard? And when we type, the natural keyboard may be better. However, most people use a mouse. And when you now have the person mouse, you can see there's much more muscle activity in all the muscles together with the natural keyboard than with the hands on their lap using a trackboard or technically working right next to the keyboard. Here you can see the different way of doing it. These are great demonstrations to help set up somebody. On the right keyboard, you have more muscle activity. On the narrow keyboard, you have less shoulder activity because you don't have as much abduction of the shoulder and arm, of the arm. You know, look at the difference when the hands on the keyboard versus on your lap. Most people with their hands on the keyboard, and people are different, often don't quite relax, and they're totally unaware. Or the height of the keyboard. If the keyboard is too high, you tend to have more tension. You don't have to always, but you do, versus the correct height of the keyboard. This is critical today as we work on laptops and work on kitchen tables or other places, because if often it's incorrect. Or we look too much, we collapse looking at the screen, our neck and shoulder tension. Again, versus being aligned. Again, look at the neck and shoulders. The arrangement of the laptop is critical. So remember, a laptop is always a compromise. If the keyboard is at the right height, which will be just above your lap, it means I have to look down. If I want to sit up and look at the screen, then I have to bring my arms up. There's no solution for that except use an external keyboard and mouse. That's one. And use the laptop as your screen as it is raised up. Or use an external monitor and use the keyboard of the laptop. so you can sit in a better position, as illustrated in this case. This is really the setup for disaster. Even if the setup is horrible, if you take many breaks and move, no problem. And here are some examples. Here, the person has a standing desk. They arrange the keyboard on a riser. Here's the external keyboard, so now they can work. Here's my setup, which I've slowly done. I've changed it in different ways. Here's my external monitor. It's really slightly better height than it looks. It depends on the angle of the camera. I happen to be sitting on a stool, so I'm using the keyboard of my laptop, but I look at the larger monitor. I've later changed that to this position, where I have a separate, I put my laptop to the side. I use the split keyboard because it's more comfortable for my hands and my mouse. Or you can use a riser. That's an alternative. But notice she's using the riser for typing, and here she can see across. Or when we're sitting so collapsed, look what happens to our spine. We're using a seat insert, such as a back joint, which tips our pelvis, so we're more erect. However, she won't all keep working like this because her screen is too low. She would have to have an external monitor over here. These are all economic solutions for ergonomics. Or you can sit, you can stand. I think if I go back, I'm lucky enough to have installed a variable desk that goes up and down, so I can have multiple positions. Or as my colleague at San Francisco has, he has a desk, he sits with multiple screens, then he stands, and he uses a board to wiggle around to get more body movement. Finally, we have the problem of slouching. When we slouch, we change our muscle tension, we decrease abdominal movement, we increase chest breathing, we reduce heart rate variability, we decrease pelvic floor engagement. It affects our blood flow by filling a neck. It impacts our cognitions. It's more difficult when we slouch to really do abstract thinking, it's very generally said, and impacts our mood, increases depression, increases powerlessness, increases anxiety. Here's a great picture to illustrate this. Notice how it is all compressed. And if you look at this is from Max Banfield. I thought it's a great one. We either get distortion of nasal and sinus cavities. We get jaw pressure affecting our teeth. We get strain in the neck. We get pressure in the throat. We get pressure in the chest cavity, pressure in the sternum, pressure on the ribs. We get pressure on the diaphragm, kidneys, colon, stomach, strain in lower back. And that's how we all work. No wonder so many of us are exhausted. Look at it another way. This is, the work by Hans Rye, where he looks at how much the equivalent pressure or on the spine muscles. Notice when your head is forward, it's an equivalent of 60 pounds. That's how you look at cell phones. But just do a little exercise how much our neck tension may work. This is slightly different. Just sit for a set. And now start looking at the screen. Really look at the screen. Start looking closer at the screen. Look at the closer, like you're really surprised. Really look at the screen. Look at all the detail at the corner. Try to get it. And as you're looking, notice your eyes may get bigger in a way. The eyes get slightly drier. Your neck will scrunch. Now take that position of scrunching. Scrunch a bit more. Pull really down. Really pull down. More and more. Do it more. That's enough. You can do this for a longer time period. And if you do this as studies, what you see, you only do about 30 seconds. You get more stiff necks. You get pressure in the back of the head. You get eye tension and headaches. This is what so many people do unknowingly. And it's these simple exercises I now often use online to have people give the experience, which I may not always do with biofeedback, because I may not always have access to it. And then when we collapse, as we collapse like this, we have much more access to negative memories. When we sit erect, it's easier to have positive memories. We have published that our brain waves activity, it takes more EEG activation to think of positive thoughts in the collapsed position than in the upright position. When you sit collapsed and if the person evoke negative memories, it's easier to access them than when they're sitting in the upright position. When you're sitting in a collapsed position versus the upright position, it's harder to do mental math, maybe just stereotypic threat, than in the upright position, as you can see in the following data. Here's the emotional recall of negative and positive memories. Or math difficulty, slouching versus erect. It's just math is just much more difficult to do. And what we now use for biofeedback in that, because that's economical, clients can borrow it, we use a little device like an upright or so, which they attach to their spine. It tells them on their cell phone, I'm collapsing or I'm upright, and it vibrates every time they collapse. And why do people collapse or slouch? Often it's ergonomic. They're bringing their head closer to the screen, but they're unaware of it. Or they're tired. Or they feel powerless, have negative thoughts. And there are many others. I cross my legs, I do it. And then they use the cues of the vibration to shift it, to interrupt. Namely, if it's ergonomic, we have a discussion about ergonomics. Do they need glasses? Do they need to have a bigger screen? Do they need to stand up more? Whenever it vibrates, also stop, look up, start breathing lower, stand in a more powerful position, change your internal language, and if tired, take a walk. And here, you see, this is me doing it. I'm sitting here, I get feedback, and I collapse. I don't know I'm doing that, but then I go back up, and I'm doing this. And when my students do this, and people at the work site, they notice that after practicing this for a number of weeks, they feel they're more aware of their posture, their positive emotions have gone up, and their negative symptoms have decreased. These are all published. And that's what they report in the end is, in the erect position, I had good thoughts about myself, my life, the world. When collapsed, my thoughts became dramatically more negative. I felt like more work to sit collapsed. It was harder to breathe, open my stomach. I didn't have much awareness of my breath. In the erect position, it seemed easier, smoother to breathe. I felt more air in my stomach. Now, these concepts are useful, especially as we're now all focusing much more, teaching people to breathe slower, HRV training. Posture is also critical in this. And finally, as I come to the end, my final recommendation are very simple. One, be aware of evolutionary trends. I gave the example of watching television. Do optimize your ergonomics. It may be as simple as getting a seat insert, putting a pillow behind your back. If you feel low energy and you're watching Netflix or television, put a pillow in your lower back so you sit more erect versus slouching, collapse. Develop more somatic awareness and training with muscle feedback, respiration. Do stress management. Do movement breaks. Do install the free stretch rate app. Schedule time without interruption. Do vision care. Every few minutes, look away at the far distance, if you can do that, to diverge and relax the eyes. Do more fitness, smile, and definitely keep the cell phone and tablets away from your body, and avoid the screens for at least 45 minutes before sleep. Many other hints, please. I'm so tickled we have described in our new book, but from this perspective. Finally, if any of you are intrigued or want to use the book with groups, let us know and we'll gladly do a free Q&A session for those groups. My contact information is here. Thank you so much. Questions?
Thank you very much, Erik, and thank you very much, everyone, for paying attention. I realize we're getting towards the end of the time, so hopefully you have some moments for questions, but we're not going to hold you too long. There's a lot of people actually thanking you very much. It's been super informative. They're really enjoying it. One question, I'm really not sure how appropriate this is, but I'm going to let it go through. An individual's asking if Dr. Kegel invented biofeedback, which I think maybe is a silly question, but what might you
No, it's a great question. Dr. Kegel, out of Southern California, who developed the periometer, the Kegel device to measure pelvic floor, he developed it independently. He did not develop biofeedback. Biofeedback has multiple strains, multiple independent practitioners. So Kegel did this with a women post-pregnancy, and this is the device you insert vaginally, and you could measure when the person timed the pelvic floor, the mercury would go up, and they could see that they were doing the exercise correctly. That was totally done independently. Similarly, let's see, EMG was done independently, more by, even before Whatmore did EMG biofeedback. There was a physician in Southern California who did this with stroke patients. Marinacci did this independently. Temperature training, I would say, was done independently by Elmore Green initially. EEG training has its roots from Joe Camilla, going onwards via Barry Sturman and Joe Luber and many others. Breathing has a long history in somatic. We contributed some of that and others. So there are many different people who came to it independently. It's most interesting in the history of biofeedback. If people are intrigued, he once wrote a little article called An Alternative View of the History of Biofeedback, I believe, that was published in the biofeedback.
Thank you. There's a lot of people who are just saying they really enjoyed your presentation. It's very clear. As a question that I can answer, I'll be getting back to all the participants about getting a free copy of that muscle biofeedback at the computer book. So don't worry about that. Check out for the email I'll be sending out. Someone is wondering, what software program did you use for the muscle activation tests?
What I use is a biograph. Traditionally, when I did this initially, we used the very small portable EMGs called the MyoTrack, which worked very well. We did it as training because at the work site, I could have included a number of pictures. Now I use a biograph Infinity system, which has worked very well for monitoring because we can make the display very clear. And we did even do at one time a little software piece, but the protocol is really pretty simple, as I said. You record for some form of muscles. I tried to illustrate a few of the muscles we used, and we monitor respiration. And basically, you have the person sit a classical stressor profile approach. You sit in a neutral position, sit under the work position, sit in a neutral position. You can now have multiple trials like this, which includes cognitive stress or time stress, to see the effect of the stress as well. Then we also used, we did a whole series of different ways to look at ergonomics, which, let's say, which mouse is more comfortable. As you can see, I don't know if you can see it, I use a funny mouse like this because it puts my wrist in. I don't know if people can see this.
Yes, we
Here
can.
we are. I put my hand is now in a kind of neutral position. If I stood, that is it's a more neutral, effortless position when I monitor the EMG. And so that's what I use. Equally, I use a split keyboard for the same reason. And note, there is no number pad next to it. And the reason I don't have a number pad next to it, if the number pad is next to it, my mouse would be more to the side, and I would have to abduct more, which would unknowingly increase the tension. The more I can centrally locate my mouse, the less tension there is. I also tend to work in a more European style, which most people do at home as well, in which my table is fairly deep, and when I sit, my hands are totally resting on the tabletop, my arms, and my hands are then at the keyboard. I don't usually recommend keyboard trays or anything like that. Luckily, this is much easier to do now because with flat screens, we have more depth on the tables. All these are ways by which I can optimize the body position. And I'm lucky on this desk. Like I said, I can make it go up. And I go up with it. And so I can alternate positions as well. And I just have to remember to keep doing that enough times. I think you can still see that. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Erik. I'm just letting the audience know that we're going to stick with the questions we have right now. We're not going to be getting any new ones because Erik will have to leave very soon. Quick question from an individual is, do you have any suggestions how to apply these biofeedback or awareness strategies if they're doing virtual ergo assessments without having equipment available?
I forgot to say that. I do that a lot. And what I have people do is they either make a little video clip or have their family members take pictures from different angles. Be sure you take it from the side and from the back, and be careful that you're sort of at the level of the cameras at the level of the desk where they're working. And so you can get a very good view, and then they email those to me, or that's a very easy way to do that. I can do an analysis fairly quickly on at least the beginning part of ergonomics. And for many people at their home setting, it's almost obvious. The arms are too high, they're sitting slouched, the chair needs, they need maybe a seat insert, they need a pillow in the back. What about your vision? Are you too close to the screen, too far from the screen? I could probably spend a whole half an hour or an hour just on the ergonomic component on those. But then there's nothing new about that.
Thank you. A different question is, an individual is wondering about adolescents who use their phones before bed. Do you have any strategy or tip about having them lose that, since it's probably not good for them?
Good luck. No, it's the worst thing you can do. I am being pragmatic enough to say that. Using the phone before bed means you get lots of blue light exposure. It means your melatonin tends to be suppressed. You also get sympathetically activated because of the social media or whatever you're watching. I would try to do it as an experiment with young people. I would try to explain this. I would have some family rules if possible, and also have people go outside much more. It's critical to do movement. From an evolutionary perspective, we did movement, hand-eye, feet coordination. That's how health occurs. There's fairly good data that kids who start exploring nature tend to reduce some of their ADHD and hyperactivity symptoms. And so do that. I know I didn't answer the question. It's very challenging to do this with teenagers. I would say my college students, I ask them to do an experiment. Can I do a study? How do you feel if for 3 days or a week if you don't use your social media before going to bed for 40 minutes? Do you feel better the morning you wake up? It's very challenging that way, because it's part of our evolutionary trap to be socially connected. And we forget that. So again, should we blame the individual, the child, the teenager, or should we blame our digital companies who have really optimized all the notifications, all the programs, so I automatically react to it?
Thank you. Someone's wondering if they do not have access to this biofeedback type equipment, or equipment that at least makes you more aware of this stress. What do you have to say if someone who wants to do this kind of self-training or adaptation without access to this type of equipment, especially when it comes to inadequate muscle activation or posture?
Well, what I said earlier is the easiest way to, that's why I do a lot of these subjective experiences, like to become, step one is awareness. So that's why I did that kind of somatic exercise of simulating mousing, or I could do another one. You put your hands in the back of your neck, like this. You sit up. You quickly look to the extreme right and then to the extreme left. And just do that for a moment. And you'll observe You'll observe 2 or 3 things. One, you can feel the muscles tightening in your neck as you're looking right or left. And 2, you probably held your breath as you did this quickly. These kind of exercises gives the person the awareness. Then I would teach them, if I don't have biofeedback, much more progressive relaxation-like exercises. Can I tighten? Feel the tension? Let it go. Can I tighten a little bit less and still feel it and let it go? Can I lift? Can I feel the tension? Yes. Let it go. Can I lift a little bit less? And I would follow much more progressive relaxation instructions. And there's another book, like I said, the book by Beata Jenks, Your Body, Biofeedback at its Best. It was one of the best books I ever read in 1977, which it's almost not available anymore, which has many of these kind of somatic tricks in it to teach you awareness. And finally, use an interrupt program. Check. How are your shoulders while you work? Oh, now let them drop. Notice I was not aware my shoulders were tight, but then I was reminded it worked.
As a final question, someone's wondering about bent knees. Does that reduce circulation if the position is held for a prolonged period?
If you hold your knees in this position, which I think you can see, which many people do, you're putting the joint in under stress, and people will tend to have a compromised blood flow. And remember, it's almost our second heart, our legs. So if I do squats and go back up, the muscles squeeze all the veins to pump the blood back up. If the muscles are not being activated for long time periods, then if muscles are not activated for long time periods, probably we have a buildup of fluids in the legs and poor circulation. Well, I want to thank everybody. I have to go. I just got notified.
That's okay. Thank you very much for going over time with us. Thank everyone who was able to attend, and we'll be sending you all a follow-up email with how you can get some additional information that we already discussed today. So everyone have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, and Thought Technology hopes to hear from you soon at our later webinars. All right? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.